This episode is about minutes 86 through 90 of The Empire Strikes Back with new guest Nic Tan. Hello there, and welcome to Star Wars Music Minute, where we celebrate the music and sound of Star Wars 5 cinematic minutes at a time. I'm Chrysanthi Tan. You can call me Xanthi or Chrysanthi, either one. And today is all about minutes 86 through 90 of Star Wars Episode 5, The Empire Strikes Back, which starts with Obi-Wan saying, "That boy was our last hope," and ends with Chewie starting to put 3PO back together. Let's just get into it. Today's guest is Nic Tan, who is my brother and probably the first, actually definitely the first person I ever talked to about Star Wars. You were my first Star Wars friend, Nick.
I don't know. Was it Alan?
Alan's our
I
other
don't
brother.
know.
I
honestly don't remember. I was so young that I honestly don't know. But if I wasn't first, I was definitely second. It was either or.
Yeah, because I remember the three of us really into it. But since Alan didn't live with us, I felt like it was probably just when he visited that we got to talk about it.
True.
Yeah.
Fair enough.
Yeah. But, okay, we can get more into this now, but I've been asking people, like, what is your first memory of when you realized certain plot points in Star Wars, like Vader being Luke's father? Like,
Yeah.
do you remember discovering stuff like that? Well, let's just start with that one, just as a warm-up.
Wow, just out of the gate, asking a huge question. That's funny you say that. I actually do remember, like, recognizing the weight of that as a child. And I think that the first time I really seriously saw Episode 5 was actually when they did this special edition release in theaters. It was Duran Reed's birthday party in, I think, 2nd or 3rd grade. And we all went to the theaters. Taco Bell had the thing where they were, like, giving out, like, the Yoda, Darth Vader kind of toys with the release. And, I remember sitting in the movie theater and at that age being like, holy crap, that is crazy. So I have, like, a real, like, moment in my life where I for sure recognize that. And that was as early as elementary school. So definitely even as a kid, you can tell. Like, I know that there are those TikToks and YouTube videos of kids seeing it and, like, their parents showing them the big reveal and they even get it. So I think that just further makes me feel, like, affirmed in my true belief that as an elementary school child, I did recognize that moment. So
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
So you recognize the weight of it, but you also remember seeing it for the first time. Like, it wasn't spoiled for you.
Oh yeah, was not spoiled for me at all.
Did you see Empire Strikes Back first before seeing A New Hope?
No, we saw A New
Okay,
Hope
okay,
first.
okay.
We actually saw it in order. You and me
Okay.
both saw it in
Okay.
order. Yeah. We did it the right way.
I genuinely remember seeing the Return of the Jedi first, but maybe I just don't remember.
Interesting.
But I don't know, because I don't remember learning that Vader was Luke's father. I just always have known. You probably spoiled it for me. I don't know,
interesting.
but I
Well,
just yeah.
to be fair, you were not at Duran Reed's birthday party. So
Very true.
I did see it before you, to be honest with you, because I feel like we've seen Star Wars, like, the first 200 times we've seen Star Wars, it was probably with each other, and that was the one time that we probably had it because it was at a birthday party.
Yeah,
So
that's true.
could be
That's
right.
true.
Could be right.
Yeah.
We'll never know.
I don't know. But I really do think you got into it slightly before me because of your friends, I think. Or maybe,
Well,
I
I
don't know
think-
why, but
I feel like I know why, and I don't know if this is something, if I'm jumping the gun and talking about this, but I think that the toys really got me into it way before you did. And the reason why I said Alan is because I distinctly remember he came to visit us and he brought with him a Y-Wing Micro Machine toy for me. And
a Micro Machine?
Yeah. I mean, it was the brand Micro Machine, but it was
Okay.
like it was like maybe that big, right?
Okay.
And
Alan
I
is our older
distinctly-
brother, for those who don't know. Yeah.
Hey, Alan, if you're watching,
Yeah.
you're getting a lot of screen time this episode. But yeah, I distinctly remember him bringing me a Y-Wing toy, which is from episode 4. And I distinctly remember sitting in the Arco parking lot while Dad was pumping gas, looking at that toy being like, what the hell is Star Wars? Like, I really didn't quite know what that was. So I think that him bringing me that toy was like kind of like the first spark to get me into it. And I think because, as you know, my toy collection just like grew uncontrollably, like that's what I think really accelerated my fandom more than you at the beginning. So at least that's my theory.
No, that
Please,
I
please
think
tell
that
me if you think
completely
it's
checks.
wrong, but
No, that completely checks out because
Yeah.
there's going to be a character that comes up in these minutes that is a character that I never really cared about, but the people who cared about it, I'm talking about Boba Fett. People who cared about him are usually people who had toys.
yeah.
And yeah, I never played with the toys. The only toys that I played with were those Taco Bell ones.
Yeah. They weren't really toys either. Calling them toys is a stretch. They're more like Star Wars branded plastic material.
Okay, but they did cool things. Like they balanced,
They did. They balanced. There was the
There was, like,
mirror
the
one
mirror
with like the
one.
Yoda.
Yeah.
I know what you're
That
talking
is-
about.
yeah.
I got you.
which is now what I think of whenever I go on Pirates of the Caribbean. Okay, let's start listening to these minutes so we can get a sense of what we are listening to here. All right.
Promise.
Oh, I need to start right at the beginning. Okay.
And I'll return. I promise.
Told you I did. Reckless as he. Now, matches are worse.
That boy is our last hope.
No, there is another.
Okay, I'll cut it off there. That
So good.
moment of the movie
So
just gets me
good.
every time.
So good.
The Force theme is my favorite. If I had to pick like a favorite of the Star Wars themes, just like as a recurring theme, it would be the Force theme. And it's that end part that really, you know how like sometimes it's just whatever, but then it doesn't always finish the phrase. It's like reserved for special moments, and this is one of those special moments. And it just like, yeah, when the cellos finish it, I don't know, it just has such a.
It's too good.
mournful-
It's too good. It should be illegal how good that part is.
I'm gonna have copious screenshots. So
Love that man.
yeah, I have him hanging on my door up there. Some people think that I am crucifying, that he's being crucified, but he's not. He is doing he's doing a workout like they do at Venice Beach. He's just working out.
Love it.
Everyone. It's
Love
fine.
it.
It's fine. But yeah, that shot at the beginning kind of reminds me of like, okay, it reminds me of two things. First of all, it reminds me of like, you know, those like cheesy gymnastics photos, Taekwondo photos, where
Yeah.
it's like just really dramatic lighting with the
Yeah.
like child blown up really big. And then sometimes there's like a little child as well in the corner. Like I totally had those gymnastics pictures where it's like my face is really big.
I remember those from AGA. Yeah, I totally
American Gymnastics
got
Academy.
it. Yeah.
And it also reminds, I don't know, it looks, the second thing it reminds me of is, oh wait, no, I'm losing it. What was I going to say? What does it remind me of? I don't know. Well, it kind of reminds me of the iPhone portrait mode here because it gets so like the studio version. But yeah, here we see just like, just a beautifully lit puppet. I mean, the way that I know you're a huge Muppet fan, Nick,
Yes.
like a huge Jim
Huge.
Henson Muppet,
Huge.
Frank Oz fan. And the puppetry in this film, like, I'm appreciating more and more every day.
Yeah.
We don't have much of Yoda in these minutes, but since we do have a little bit, like, what are your feelings about Yoda's portrayal in these films?
Yoda is without a doubt the best character in Star Wars to me. It's like not even close. I'm not saying
Really?
like him. I'm not saying him as like what he believes in or what he stands for. I'm mostly just talking about like how he gets people to feel in the movies because like Star Wars is such this big, epic, sprawling opera, like that. It's called a space opera for a reason, and yet this puppet is a character that so many people identify with as like the OG of Star Wars. And I think that's just so cool that like you have like explosions and these ships and all this dramatic lightsaber battles, and a puppet is what really does this movie for a lot of people. And I don't know, personally for me, I prefer puppet Yoda over CGI Yoda any day of the week. And even when you go back and you look at how they make the puppet scenes on Dagobah with Yoda, it just really escalates kind of your appreciation for how they were able to make this character, make this movie what it is today. And I think that's something so special that you can't recreate. And you hear about it all the time when people make Muppet movies, that like it's the most magical experience making movies with puppets. And I think this is no different. Yoda is by far and away for me like the coolest part of Star Wars, period.
It's funny you say that because, well, I'm actually inclined to agree. And as a kid, I certainly felt that way. I think Empire Strikes Back growing up was my least watched movie, except for the Dagobah scenes. Like, okay, you know how like Sound of Music, we would always stop it. We would not ever finish it.
Yeah.
It just like, I don't know, when my memories of watching Sound of Music were just like the singing parts or whatever, and then I didn't understand the scary stuff happening on the end. Plus, we had the VHS, and it was like a whole separate tape to put in. But Empire Strikes Back, I don't have that many clear memories of. As I say this, I'm like, no, I do have clear memories of losing the hand and everything. I don't know. But in my mind, I'm like, okay, clearly I wasn't just putting on the Empire Strikes Back and skipping to the Yoda sections. But the Yoda sections felt like the dessert of the movie. Like the
I agree,
part,
100%.
Because I think as a kid, I liked Return of the Jedi the best overall.
Agreed, 100%. Yeah.
But Empire Strikes Back, in it for the Yoda training.
Yep, I agree, 100%. And I think that's reflected in our merchandising purchases as children, because if you remember, we had that Yoda inspirational poster hanging in your room for like 10 years straight. So I think that like when you look at the kind of merchandise we had from Star Wars, it was mostly like episode 4, episode 6, and then that Yoda poster, which I actually hung the exact same poster in my room during med school because I needed something to get me over the hump. So I think I agree with you completely that Yoda, like even though it's in the middle of the movie, the Yoda scenes are like, that is the S tier of the Star Wars universe for me. That's it. That's really what it comes down to. Yoda's the best. We can end the podcast now. It's done. It's set in stone.
Well, the funny thing is that I keep saying the funny thing. I mean, I guess it's not funny. I guess it's just like a brilliant movie full of symbolism and everything. But the Yoda training scene, especially as someone who has since this movie came out, since seeing this movie for the first time, there's been a lot more Star Wars come out since then. And we've seen other types of training scenarios. And even if we just consider the prequels, we've seen different styles of training. We've seen different mentor and mentee or master and Padawan, whatever, relationships. So we've seen like several different ways that this can go. And Yoda, like in that context, Yoda, it feels like a uniquely wise, like a unique Jedi Master, even amongst the other Jedi Masters. Makes sense. He's like almost 1,000 years old. He is sort of a heavy-handed teacher at times, where he is not like Qui-Gon, who is more willing to give. Qui-Gon will go off the beaten track, and he will kind of find examples, and he's willing to like do weird stuff, like test people's midichlorians, and he is a different kind of Jedi. I love Qui-Gon. He's a different kind of Jedi. Yoda is more like, I'm not like the priest almost. Like he is sort of just saying the word of the Force. Yeah. And he's not really going to entertain too many of the diversions, but he's really like in the back of my head, if I'm like, what is the Force? Like I need guidance. I don't need those little offshoots. I just need to remember what the way is. In my head, I'm thinking of what Yoda is saying. Even if it's heavy-handed sometimes, I'm thinking like, No, Yoda
Agree.
says this.
Yeah. Yoda's like that chemistry professor that like teaches at Harvard that has like a Nobel Peace, not a peace, but he has a Nobel Prize in chemistry, yet still teaches like chemistry 101 and just like drops like golden nuggets all day long and doesn't give a shit about what you have or what you do. He's like, this is it. This is the Force. You take it or leave it, and I'm gonna teach you. And if you're not gonna be open to receive it, well then you're not gonna make it. And I think that's generally how I've always perceived Yoda. Is he's a G. He's the G. He's top dog of all top dogs, and he's just so cool. Like he's so cool. I don't know how else to put it. He's so cool.
Yeah. Well, and here we have also Obi-Wan coming in where, let's see.
That boy is our last hope.
No, there is another.
The relationship between Obi-Wan and Yoda, especially in Obi-Wan's Force ghostiness,
Yeah.
is really interesting. It's like Obi-Wan has always been portrayed as sort of a more by-the-book Jedi as well, or at least trying to be by the book. And yeah, saying that boy is our last hope. Like, I feel like he just really wants Yoda to just train him to just whip Luke into shape no matter what. And,
Yeah.
you know, even if Yoda's like, take it or leave it, Obi-Wan's like, no, we have to do this. No, we have to do this.
Yeah.
Don't give up on him.
Yeah. Yeah, it's weird too because like I think this is where the prequels kind of also like in retrospect color my understanding of this scene because like watching this as a kid, I always thought that like, oh, Obi-Wan and Yoda are like on the same level, like they're equals. And maybe at this point in their relationship that's true, but like when I watch like the prequels, like it's very clear that like Yoda is the top dog of all the Jedi, and Obi-Wan at one point is like literally
A Padawan.
at the lowest level. And I think that it's really interesting to me to see how Obi-Wan has grown from being like a Padawan who literally at the beginning of episode 1 looks like a teenager. I mean, no, he's not, but he looks like a teenager. And then here we are at episode 5, and he's the one that's really on an equal footing as Yoda. And I know a lot's happened between that moment and that moment in Empire, but I think it is something that has changed my kind of feeling when I watch that scene now. Just like having that context for like where Obi-Wan came from versus when I was a kid seeing that moment thinking that Obi-Wan and Yoda were equals.
Okay. I don't know if I ever thought that they were equals, but it's possible that I did. I think I still wouldn't say. Oh, okay. Do you think they're equals? You don't think they're equals anymore?
No.
Now
I don't think they're
equals.
equals. I think that, but it's closer. It's like a closer power differential than it actually was at one point. Like, I mean, obviously Obi-Wan's what, like 70, 80 years old, but Yoda's 900. Like, of course they're not going to be equals, but it's a much closer gap than I was initially. Sorry, it's a much closer gap than like looking back in retrospect how far of a power differential there was between Yoda and Obi-Wan.
Yeah. I think also there is something about Obi-Wan now being dead, now being a Force ghost, that now Obi-Wan has more experience than Yoda in something. So so Yoda almost is now looking up to Obi-Wan as like a mentor that will teach him how to become one with the Force and whatever.
I actually never thought about that. Never. So now I gotta watch it again.
Damn.
And think about it in that context. I didn't think about that. That's true. I guess as a kid I always assumed like Obi-Wan never died. He's just been like hanging out like a ghost around everyone, like, you know. But now that I think about it, that's some hard-hitting stuff. Crap.
Have you heard of the From a Certain Point of View books?
No.
Okay, so they're kind of just, they were put out for like the anniversaries of these films. I don't remember, 30 year, 60 year, I don't know, wrong numbers, I'm sure. But they are more recent books-ish, in the 2000s. And they are it goes through, like, for example, the Empire Strikes Back one goes through the Empire Strikes Back as a series of short stories told from other points of view, people that weren't the main people in the scene, or
Yeah, okay.
you know, or it'll
Cool.
tell the point of view from this character, but like before or after the main thing. Basically, it's what happens in the movie, but from a certain point of view, from a different point of view. So
And these are like approved. Like this is not like fan fiction. This is
it's
like,
not fan fiction, no.
Okay.
Like quote unquote real Star Wars authors,
Yeah.
a lot of them contributed short stories, but it's like 20, 30 people in each book contributed. So it's like, in the canon tier, it's like considered sort of canon, but book canon is considered like a lower tier than movie canon. But whatever, it is canon, but it's also like kind of irrelevant because it's like one of the stories is told from the perspective of the Exegorth, being like the space slug, being like, I'm gonna get a nice a meal or whatever, like these nice people,
Nice.
whatever. So
I'm sure you love that one.
right. So there is like a lot of there are things from Yoda's point of view, and I feel like the talk, and also in the A New Hope from a certain point of view, there is lots of talk about like what it means to be a Force ghost and to kind of yeah. Also, I know you haven't seen the Clone Wars yet, but they do, either in the Clone Wars or in Rebels, they do talk about the Force Ghost thing a little bit more. But we do know that it sort of is a thing that Qui-Gon figured out how to do.
Right, right. And I remember they allude to that at the end of episode 3 too. So
Totally.
I think that is something I've always been interested in. So but here's the thing too though, like I don't know if I want to necessarily know all the details of what happens. I think that's like a recurring theme, not just in Star Wars, but in movies in general. Like the mystery is more powerful than the actual like realization or the representation of it. But
No,
guess
I
that's
agree
neither here nor there
100%.
right now, but
No, I agree totally, which is gets into the discussion of what Star Wars is doing right now.
yeah.
Okay, so the music that we are hearing, we are just finishing up 8M3 Lando's Palace. Are we finishing it up? I don't know. To be continued. Well, that's the one we are in. We're in Lando's Palace. And I'll play it on the piano. So we're in G minor. And this is fairly typical for the Force theme. We have like a descending bass line. What a beautiful chord. G sus2, D sus4, and then it goes down to just a G unison. Oh my God.
It's too good. It's so good.
I know.
So good.
I know. I think something that also really elevates
so good.
this part is that you can hear the whole time while this Force cue is playing. It's like, it's not playing just on its own. It's like the very loud sound of Luke's X-Wing being like about to
Right.
peace out is in the background. It's like, well, I'll play it again, but
And I'll return. I promise.
it's like
Love
the
it.
Force theme, Luke. What about the Force theme? And it's like, nope, I'm in my X-Wing.
Told you I did. Reckless to see. Now, matches our worst.
You can hear the pitch
That
rising.
boy is our last hope.
No, there is another.
Now we see that's him blasting off. Yeah. And I love this transition. Let me put a
I was just about to
screenshot.
say that. I feel like the coolest part about that theme is you never know what it's going to transition to. Like sometimes it transitions something completely different. So I'm with you there. I don't have anything else to add besides my recurring theme of it's just too good. It's just too good. It's too good.
And look at
They
this
don't make
shot.
them like this anymore.
That's true.
So
Look
good.
at this shot.
You know,
So
I was having this discussion yesterday because, as you know, I'm making my way through all the movies nominated for all the Academy Awards, and last night I watched Babylon, which is largely considered to be like the front runner for best original score. and I was having the discussion. I was like, man, they really do not make movie scores like they used to. And I know I don't want to sound like one of those people where it's like, oh, back in the old days. I wasn't even alive for this old days, but
Right,
I
right.
think the point is actually still relevant because like this score was so good and it didn't even win Best Original Score at the Oscars that year, which is an absolute crime against humanity. So I don't mean to take another dig at Babylon, but this is just like really making me appreciate everything John Williams has done for humanity even more. Even in what I consider to be, like I mentioned to you before we started, this is probably 5 of the least interesting minutes in Star Wars Empire Strikes Back to me, yet it is still better than like almost everything else out there. But sorry to step on your toes about the transitions. I just got really excited about the music.
Well, I want to prod like what you mean by they don't make scores like this anymore, because I agree. But why do you think that is?
I don't know why. I
Or
honestly
what
don't
is
know
the
enough.
Okay.
I know what I think the difference is. I think it's the de-emphasis of something on as grand a scale as Star Wars is. When it comes to movie making, I feel like a lot of the movies that are like really being popularized. I can't even say that word. You know what I'm trying to say.
Yeah.
Like a lot of the Oscar movies this year are like a lot of like observational movies or like not necessarily like documentaries, but like there's a lot more emphasis on like observation of the human condition versus like let me present you a narrative story and walk you through the emotional beats of it. I feel like there's a lot more stock in presenting images and presenting scenarios and letting you interpret kind of how to feel based off that versus having it kind of like spoon-fed to you like it is in Star Wars. I'm not saying one's better than the other. I'm just commenting
trend.
that like that I tend to like both in steady diets, but I think that the way that John Williams literally is a character in all of the Star Wars movies is just a testament to how good he is and how great that this whole experience is. It truly is the top tier of top tiers, and I don't think anyone would argue with that. And I'm not saying anything new or exciting. I'm merely just commenting that I miss it. That's pretty much it.
Okay. Do you think more modern John Williams scores are also magical in a similar way?
No, but I think I don't want to say anything too controversial on here. I think there's 2 things that come into play. I think number 1, let's be real here, he's not as young and prolific as he used to be.
He is pretty prolific, but he's certainly not as young.
Sorry, I guess not as young. I honestly don't follow his career that closely, but at least in terms of like when I can't name a John Williams score that he wrote in the last 5 years. I'm sure he's written many. I just personally can't come up with one.
Okay.
But so I'll just take the prolific part out of it. But he's not as young as he used to be, and I think that plays a factor. But I think more so, and I hate to say it, I just think the Star Wars quality has gone down significantly, and I think that as good as John Williams is, he can't carry the whole team for everyone, So I think that when the source material is lacking, it kind of needs to... When the source material is lacking, he can't make up all the slack. And I know what people are going to say. They're going to say, well, what about episode 1? I actually like episode 1. I actually like episode 1, so we could have a whole nother discussion about this when we get to that movie. But I think at the very least, if you are someone that does not like episode 1 as a whole, you will recognize that the Darth Maul Duel of the Fate scenes are absolutely badass. And at a minimum, you like those scenes. And I think that's at a minimum. And I think that's where we can have some common ground, because Duel of the Fates to a double-sided lightsaber with 2 Jedis fighting, you cannot look me in the eye and tell me that you hate all of episode 1, because that is some of the best Star Wars scenes out there, set to some of the best music out there, and I will fight you verbally and physically if I have to about that.
Do you remember singing that when we were kids?
Oh yeah, and I remember you were looking up like the Sanskrit like lyrics. I don't remember. I remember you told me something about like trees battling or something. I don't remember the exact specifics, but you were really into the lyrics for some reason, and I still don't quite understand why. But I very distinctly know and remember us in the study listening to that on CD, and you telling me about Battle of the Trees or something. I don't know.
Okay,
Correct me
so
if I'm wrong.
I never fully knew what the lyrics were. I mean, but what I was interested in, what I was doing was like transcribing what I thought they were.
Got it. Okay. That's still more than most people, Chrysanthi.
True. Whoa, there's my sound. I don't know if my sound got weird before, but anyway, no, I was writing down like what I thought it was, and it would be like, it was for the purpose of singing it, so we could go like
Right.
yeah.
Yeah.
Good times.
I remember.
Good times.
I remember that. I remember that vividly.
So what were we talking? Oh, okay. So back to the I guess the idea, the theme of movies not being like this, scores not being like this anymore. I want to ask you, as someone who, you used to go to like filmmaking camp and studied film. Do you think movies? Do you think it's driven by the movies that are made?
Yes, I do, and it's not a good or bad thing. It just is what it is. It's kind of just how like film noir went out of style. It just is, and I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I like so many movies that come out that are not like this. Like, I don't know how plugged in you are. Have you seen All Quiet on the Western Front by any chance? No. Well, it's basically the exact opposite of Star Wars, but it makes it no less epic. I don't like it any less. It's more so just, I feel like the appetite of the world is more so, I want to make my own decisions about how I'm feeling versus here you go. And I think that's reflected in movies, and the movies that are still like in the Star Wars kind of realm in terms of like maybe a little more manipulative in emotions are just not as good anymore. Like before, I feel like, Star Wars was represented as like high art or high culture. And now I feel like, no one looks to a Marvel movie and is like, oh man, Ant-Man Quantumania is high culture. I'm not saying I personally agree or disagree with that. I'm just saying that I think that that's kind of generally what my observation has been when it comes to kind of the scene of cinema right now. But feel free to disagree.
I mean, I don't disagree, but I would just also add that that composers, that the state of the industry, like as a business, is fundamentally different. I mean, it's fundamentally the same, profit-driven, whatever. It's fundamentally the same in some respects, but also changes in technology have shifted things massively. And so now that composers can make things with like all virtual instruments just on their computer, or, do really quick mock-ups, there is, and those things can provide the production with earlier drafts, like to be able to plan ahead, change, I don't know. Basically what I'm saying is composers aren't really given the budget, the time, the space to do something like this anymore. And also because of like micro editing and stuff, the cues are not preserved for very long. There's so many cuts in between things that composers don't even have an incentive. There's no reason to write a really through composed long thing. Oftentimes it's just called for to write short, tiny little cells that will be chopped up because the movie's going to get chopped up.
And I mean, I really like the point you made about, the virtual instrumentation thing. I think there's a couple of points I wanted to mention. And I think that virtual instrumentation, though, is something that, and once again, this way better than I do, but I think back to some of the classically like known as like some of like the best soundtracks of all time, and Vangelis was doing virtual instrumentation back with Blade Runner and Chariots of Fire, like movies that were made in the 80s. And I don't necessarily think that there is a lot of artists that were contemporary to him doing it, but I certainly think that now what you're saying is absolutely true. And I mean, I can think off the top of my head, like listening to the scores from this year alone, like there were a lot more of those, like you mentioned, like virtual instrumentation, like a little bit more of the micro stuff. I know Atticus Ross and Trent Reznor are like really big and have been doing it for a long time. But I think in general, everything you say is true. I just am trying to figure out where I'm not where, but like when are we gonna have the next like John Williams type person? Hans Zimmer, I guess, is kind of close to that, but
No,
I feel
not
like
close at all.
I feel like we're missing. Well, I actually would disagree. I think that he is close in terms of like people will listen to a movie and be like, "This is Hans Zimmer." You know, like I feel like people would know, like
Sure.
even people who aren't like that into composing or music scores. I feel like a lot of people would be like, "Is this Hans Zimmer?" I feel like that's possible.
It is possible.
But I feel like there's, at least for me, I'm waiting for like that next kind of like who's gonna take the John Williams like mantle of like the symphonic, you know, very like classical type of movie composition, because I it's something that I would want to see at least still be present in my, you know, movie going experience heading forward for the rest of my life.
Yeah.
So I'm just
As a player,
curious,
I would like that too. So
Yeah.
that also I could possibly be employed.
Yeah.
But oh my gosh, you said a lot of interesting things. One thing is that I want to make a distinction between synthesizers and virtual instruments, because synthesizers, which is like what Vangelis used and like those things, I consider them in a separate category than virtual instruments, which virtual instruments, I think of like the most obvious example would be trailer music, which would be, I mean, like sample libraries, like basically instruments that don't sound like they don't sound like they're synths. In fact, what Vangelis used was like a synth, like it was an instrument. It was an instrument. It was not a quote unquote virtual instrument that you just open up Logic or GarageBand or whatever, or Pro Tools and whatever. So I'm talking about virtual instrument libraries that are made to sound like they're a string section. It's a virtual string section. It's a virtual horn section. So those things often replace the orchestra, the live orchestra. And for me, I can hear the difference.
Okay.
Like some instruments translate to virtual easier than others. Strings are still usually really crap in virtual instrument. And then it influences also the type of writing, because the string, having the really intimate like string sound is hard to do, but it's easier to pull it off if you do lots of like sharp hits, or you do lots of like ostinato, like, you know, just kind of is easier to pull off than like a lyrical like string line, because it's so hard to get that. And so the tools that composers are using, for example, composers don't always have the budget to use an orchestra, and it's just not always what's going to happen. And yeah, so because they're writing while they are recording and doing a mock-up or whatnot, they'll end up writing things that their virtual instruments can sound okay at. So they're fundamentally writing different things because of the tools that they're using. It's all a whole...
Interesting.
It's a whole thing, yeah.
Is there, and I don't, it's okay if you can't think of anything on top of your head, but is there a movie score that you know of off the top of your head that uses the virtual instruments? Like, press 6 for the horn sound. You know what I mean? Like, where you like you were just saying, like, it almost sounds like you're programming it on one of those old school keyboards where you like press the horn button and then you play the notes, right? Is there a score? Is there a score that, I know I'm kind of putting you on the spot here. I don't mean to do that, but can you think of any that are like that? Because I'm just curious, because that would be something that has slipped my recognition. Because I can't think of one on top of my head, to be honest with you. Trailer music, yeah.
Right. So the thing is, like, oftentimes, and this is very common. First of all, it's very common to use virtual instruments in movies, but thinking of one that is 100% virtual instruments, I'm not sure off the top of my head. Hans Zimmer actually uses a ton of virtual instruments. And he is sort of like considered one of the bigger, this is totally not a good word to use, but I can't think of another word, quote unquote, offenders with moving the industry more in this direction. Now, what you said is also true, which is even though his methods are completely different than John Williams, very different than John Williams, he is another big figure in the scoring world who some would say have a recognizable sound. Some would say he actually has a sound that's very easy to rip off of, but whatever, it doesn't matter. Undoubtedly, they are the two biggest names. And they represent two different like schools of thought with two different methods. And people like them both, but for different reasons. So what is really common is to have a largely virtual instrument score that is augmented with live players. So you might have virtual, like you might have a virtual orchestra, whatever, but then have a soloist. You might have a cello soloist. You might have vocal soloists. You might have, and that is really common. So those augmented scores is like the norm, I'd say, because I think for the certain standout sections, it's easier to hire like a soloist or just like a spotlight instrument than to get a whole orchestra.
That's crazy. I honestly had no idea they did that.
Yeah.
That's insane.
I mean, Pirates of the Caribbean.
Really? Are you serious?
Largely. The thing is, Hans Zimmer is very good at playing his instrument, which is the computer. Really good at it. Like, and it genuinely takes skill. Like, it's not easy for someone to just learn it off the bat, how to manipulate things on the computer. It's a whole other skill that a lot of people don't have. Although composers nowadays have to learn how to do the virtual thing. They have to. There's no way around it. Yeah. But here we don't have virtual
Adapt or die, yeah.
Adapt or die, yeah.
Yeah, it's crazy.
It's a whole thing, yeah. I'm hoping the industry slows down. As I say that, I know how unlikely that is. Yeah. Okay, so we're transitioning here to... All right. We're getting all these different shots. Now we're in the atmosphere of Cloud City. It's quite an extended transition. And finally ending here. But that whole 25 seconds or maybe even more, maybe less, whatever, was just shots of like Luke flying away and then shots of the exterior of Cloud City.
Oh, Chrysanthi, you are missing the most important part of this shot.
Oh no.
And it is the cloud car.
Oh my God, no. You're right. You're so right.
And I mean, I'm sure we'll talk about it, but the cloud car is one of the coolest looking things in all of Star Wars. Like, even as a kid, I was obsessed with that thing. And I know it probably wasn't in the original cut of it. This is a special edition version that we're watching, right?
Yeah. It's actually the 2004 DVD release, but...
Gotcha, okay. Either way, Star Wars is, kind of like how Boba Fett is so loved because of how cool he looks. Like, that's how I feel about the cloud car, As someone who liked the vehicles more than characters did in Star Wars, the cloud car was always, like, one of the top tier vehicles in Star Wars. And I don't know why, but the fact that it's orange, always just, got me super excited. I don't know why. Star Wars never misses when it comes to the vehicles or the character design or any of that. And I think that, watching this cutscene, there's 2 cloud cars, or even 3 cloud car shots in this, because there's one where it's, slightly in, the window of the background. But I think that this is a perfect use of time for us to just look and gaze upon the glory that is the cloud car, because it's like Boba Fett. You just want to know more about it. Like I would watch a series about Star Wars vehicles. Like, not even like a narrative, just like each episode is like a 20-minute chunk of like, here's a Star Wars vehicle, let's go on a tour of it. And they walk you through like the design when they were making it in the movies, they walk you through like the filming of it, and then afterwards they walk you through like the theoretical of like, this is what a cloud car is in the inside, this is what it does, this is how it operates in the Star Wars universe. That's the kind of content that I would watch from a Star Wars perspective at this juncture in my life. And I'm sure a lot of people would feel the same. You know, I guarantee it 100% people would sign up to watch a Vehicles of Star Wars show. And if someone from Lucasfilm was watching, just
do it.
I have other things going on in my life. I can't do anything with it, but you could certainly pay me for the idea.
If you want.
If you want.
Yeah. Yeah, no, you're right. You're totally right, of course. And the way that we go from space and then we see, you know, the distinct, like, it's probably a matte painting of, it's probably a matte painting of Cloud City from a distance. And, you know, it's like that really nice white image with the, here, I'll put a picture with the, you know, the clouds and it looks like a spinning top. And then with each cut, we zoom in, you know, a little bit more until finally the cloud car is passing by the window that Leia is pacing in, and then we go inside that room where Leia is. So it's just a nice way without words to just like, the musical transition takes us there, and then visually we have just I don't know, it's easy to understand where we are because of this transition.
Yeah. And I think it needs a lot of orienting too, because there's something so strange about a floating city. I don't know why. Like, to me, it just like still breaks my brain to think about it. Like, when you look at the picture again, a part of you is like, how did the laws of physics apply to this thing? So I definitely think the orientation is is much needed, and like I said, we'll take any excuse to look at cloud cars. So yeah, I'm down for it.
There's Leia pacing in the window. Cloud City really confused me as a kid. I did not understand it at all, especially when we start getting to the Vader stuff. I'm like, where exactly are we? How many turns 100%. And rooms are there? What is this? So throughout this, of course, we are hearing well, I'll play it again. Let's see. We have this kind of demure flute and oboe thing. They're playing the main theme, of course, which is Luke's theme, basically. And the harp flourish really leads us off. I have to shout out the harp flourish. Oh my gosh. Right here. There's the harp. Okay, so first we have the trumpets doing the main theme, which makes sense to me because Luke is kind of, I don't know, it's like sort of like Luke is coming. Harp. And as we get tighter in, the instrument lightens up. The camera is careening around, like even tilting, like with the ships. And now, I love the way that doors sound, the way that the door opens.
Yes. Oh, so good.
So now we are inside of Cloud City living quarters, and let's see.
The ship's almost finished. 2 or 3 more things and we're in great shape.
The sooner the better. Something's wrong here. No one has seen or knows anything about 3PO. He's been gone too long to have gotten lost.
Thank you for caring, Leia. Thank you for caring about 3PO. Han doesn't care. Or he doesn't.
Happy.
Or he acts like, He's like, changes the subject immediately. But Leia, thankfully, actually is disturbed by this.
Yeah.
I'll talk to Lando. See what I can.
Kisses her on the forehead.
I don't trust Lando.
Well, I don't trust him either. He is my friend. Besides, we'll soon be gone.
And then you're as good as gone, aren't you?
Obviously, this is the Han and Leia theme. Do you have thoughts about the Han and Leia theme?
Oh, I love it. I mean, I don't have a nuanced approach like you do to understanding it. I really think that I just go back to like when I was a kid. It's like I pop in the CD and I'm like, okay, what are the tracks I'm skipping to? And that would probably be one of 4 or 5 tracks that I really loved on that episode 5 CD. So beyond saying that I love it and I emotionally connect to it, I don't really have anything else like to analyze about it. It just makes me feel like I'm home essentially. So I'm sure you'll have some mind-blowing things to say about it, but I like it. I like it a lot.
I mean, I think I like it a lot too. I think the way it ends in this instance is really interesting. Let's hear it
See
again.
what I can find out.
I don't trust Lando.
Well, I don't trust him either. He is my friend.
So it's pretty standard at this point.
Soon be gone.
And then you're as good as gone, aren't you?
Now right here. It like ends on a question. Like
Yeah.
the way that like oboe and clarinet goes from like it's doing its usual like it's doing that was probably the wrong note. It's fine.
Here. No one has seen or something's wrong here. No one has seen or knows anything about 3PO. He's been gone too long to have gotten lost.
Relax. I'll talk to Lando. See what I can find out.
I don't trust Lando.
Well, I don't trust him either. He is my friend. Besides, we'll soon be gone.
And then you're as good as gone, aren't you?
Okay. It's when she says you're as good as gone too, it sounds like the melody is also leaving. It escapes. With just like trails off with a perfect fifth, which is basically like if we're in this key, which is like C sharp major, it goes which would be like the minor 4 of this. And this sort of, I don't know, it has it's not out of line with how the theme naturally goes, but just the emphasis on that melody. And also like the diminuendo, right. Just the way that it kind of trails off is like, I don't know, Leia's saying, you're as good as gone, aren't you? And she's sort of, what she means is like, I hope you don't go.
Yeah. Oh, it's so good.
I know.
It's so good.
So, okay, now this is a hilarious part that we're coming up on. This is the end of Lando's palace. So we're about to enter a spot with no music. Like, where is Chewie?
Just hanging out in dumpsters.
It's like, meanwhile, like the most beautiful thing in the world has been directly contrasted with the most industrial, noisy situation where Chewbacca is clearly like in, like in the boiler room of the ship where all, or whatever.
And once again, Star Wars coming through with the cool just things in it. You see the IG-88 prototype droid just hanging out in that dumpster, and you're like, oh my gosh, that thing is so cool. I have that toy.
You did? Okay. Wow.
I mean, a lot of people did, yeah.
I don't think I realized the extent to how many toys you had.
Oh, so many, but
you had a lot.
Yeah, there's a lot. There's a lot.
And those like ferrety sounding creatures that...
Yeah.
They're
called ugnaughts.
Yeah.
That's their name.
They're ugnaughts, which I think this is their premiere appearance in Star Wars.
Premiere appearance.
The ugnaughts strike back. They're supposed to be porcine creatures. They sound a little bit ferrety to me, but that's okay. I'll let it slide. I haven't heard like that many porcine species though, so I could be wrong. And of course, ugnaughts.
Besides Gamorrean guards, can you think of anything else? I can't really think of anything else.
Oh, you mean in Star Wars? I meant in real life, but in Star Wars too. Yeah. I mean, I guess I'm just sound design wise. I'm not sure how they came up with, like how Ben Burtt came up with sound for the ugnaughts. I mean, clearly he has a big library of animal sounds, and I don't know if this sounds like pigs to me, but I'm saying I don't. People who have more pig experience, you can let me know if I'm wrong. But
Please do. That's the number one priority.
Totally. So there is a flashing furnace in this room that, first of all, it's horrifying. This situation is horrifying. Like, this flashing furnace situation reminds me of like the practical fire effects on a Disneyland ride that you're seeing behind a scrim. It's like there's a fire happening behind there. And yeah, it kind of sounds like you're outside the venue of like a heavy metal concert. It makes me think that like, is this the trash compactor scene of this movie? Like, does every movie have to have some like noisy industrial sounding? Certainly in Attack of the Clones, we have the like droid, the stomping, the
droid factory.
The droid factory. I guess it's just always good to have one of those.
I kind of like it. I'm not gonna lie, and the lack of like the negative space of the music is actually kind of cool. Like it kind of tells you like this is not as glamorous or important as anything else you're seeing. So
totally,
I don't know. I'm down for it. I'm down for this scene, and it just looks cool. That's the thing. That's my thesis about Star Wars, is that it just looks cool.
It looks cool,
and this is example number 127 about it. So I'm down for it.
So you think 3PO's misery looks cool?
Well, okay, but you got to remember, like, I'm trying to go back to my space as a child, Like, when I'm watching this scene as a child, I don't care about 3PO, really. In fact, I think all of us are annoyed at 3PO at this part. And it's not necessarily like we are thinking about him in the same way that Leia is thinking about him. We're thinking about him in the way that Han's thinking about him as children. And when I watched that scene,
I didn't.
As a child, I didn't really care about 3PO. I'm not going to lie. I watched the scene and I was like, okay, what toy can I buy from this scene? And I like literally look at this scene and I'm like, there's so much cool stuff in it. Not necessarily like, oh, I'm jumping to buy this one particular toy, but I just think that it looks cool. And like, as a kid, when you're watching it, like, it's just like visual candy. Even this scene is visual candy. So I'm not too hung up on 3PO's plight during this part. I'm more so just trying to take in like the imagery more so than anything.
Yeah. I mean, I care about 3PO. However, I think this whole part with 3PO is like fantastic for the movie. The imagery of 3PO in a bundle that Chewbacca carries around for the next several minutes is fantastic. And just the embedded humor in the character that we already know 3PO to be. It's like 3PO doesn't have to do anything new or funny. He just has to be himself. But when talking to R2 and trying to give orders and be bossy while strapped in pieces to Chewie's back and facing the wrong way, is just gold.
It's great. But I think the thing too is that like, do we ever feel like 3PO is actually in danger at this juncture in our lives? Like, I know now, like, a lot of movies have, like, a lot of loss where, like, main characters will die and, like, there will be tragedy. But, like, I always kind of got the sense, even as a kid watching Star Wars, that everything was going to be fine. And
me too.
In the end, like, this is all just part of the journey. So I think part of the reason why I'm kind of just, like, ambivalent to this whole 3PO part is like a part of me just subconsciously knew even back then that 3PO is going to have some comedic stuff happen to him, but he's going to be fine in the end. Let's not get hung up on it. Let's look at the other stuff in this scene. So that was kind of my always feeling even back then.
Yeah, I mean, I agree that. Okay, so the contrast of all the different sounds happening.
What happened?
Now it's that stuff, the sound immediately changed. And even though we're not looking on screen at what's happening, we can hear because of we can hear that the visually there's been a change, a cut to a different scene. Because the place where Leia has been standing is obviously much quieter. And she cares.
Where?
Good old Leia.
Found him in a junk pile.
Okay.
Chewie, you think you can repair?
Do you hear that that alarm
Lando's
type of thing in the
gonna
background?
fix him.
No.
Sorry, am I interrupting?
I don't think I heard that. To be
Not
honest with
really.
It's okay. It's D. There.
You
D.
look absolutely beautiful. You truly belong here with us among the clouds.
Thank you.
It's pretty soft. It's in the background
you.
going.
What about it?
Boom, 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 boom.
Oh, it sounds like an elevator.
Boom, boom. Oh, yeah.
No?
Yeah.
Join me for a little
Yeah.
Yeah. That's all I mean. Okay.
Yeah, I know
it's
that.
it reminds me of let's see.
Thank you.
Would you join me for a little refreshment? Everyone's invited, of course.
I don't know why an elevator would be beeping for that long, but
Yeah.
it reminds me of like, in the movie Tar, when there's that interval that keeps playing. Or there's the interval that she hears. I can't remember if it's like her doorbell or whatever. It goes like, no. That's what this movie is. I can't remember what the Tar one is. Something like that. And then she kind of hums it and then plays it on the piano. This incessant interval. It just reminded me of that. Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah. So then we have the other ding ding, which is Lando entering, of course. Well, and then he enters.
Lando.
Would you join me for a little refreshment? Everyone's invited, of course.
So Han is like rolling his eyes at
Love it.
Lando,
Love it.
the smooth talker. And look at this smooth face.
I love this guy.
Do you?
I love Lando. He's so cool.
Okay, I'll ask you more
So
questions
cool.
about Lando in a second when we get to a part that makes me like stressed to watch. From a certain point of view, Empire book for this section, it's like from the perspective of Lando's, like the Cloud City like head cook, chef or whatever, and it is basically Lando is telling her like, look, I know this is a really bad hour for you. It's like midnight or whatever, but we have a dinner guest tonight and you're going to have to put on a really good dinner. It's like basically about her getting the order that she's going to have to cook dinner, where she's like, who is it for? And then she finds out it's for Darth Vader and she's like, oh crap. And then
How does Darth Vader even eat at these dinner functions though? Like
that
that's
is
my
addressed
next question.
that is addressed in the story. It's supposed to be just for show because they can't
okay.
they have to act like everything's normal. Like,
Yeah. That's
so,
awkward.
yeah. So that's happening.
Or Anakin.
I know.
Having trouble with your droid?
No. No problem.
Come on, Han.
Love it. Love it.
So, yeah, it's pretty great. And this whole past minute, there's been no music, almost a minute, 50 seconds. No, yeah. And the no music in this section, especially where Han and Leia are when Lando joins them, it feels like that awkward waiting period because the music kind of tells us like, okay, now this is happening. Whatever this is determined by what the music is telling us. But in lieu of that, we're just waiting for the next music to cue us in.
Right.
And Leia turns around and we see her walking out. I mean, Han escorts her, kind of by the forearm. And from behind her, we see a close-up of her hair. This isn't, okay. Her hair reminds me of Cindy Lou.
Yes.
In the
Oh, that's so good. That's so good.
She's got
I
the
didn't even
braids
think about
coming
that.
out.
That's so good. That's too good. That's too good.
Yeah. I like to think that there was some inspiration taken.
Yeah.
Probably not, but
No, we're gonna roll with it.
Yeah, we'll roll. Okay, thank you. So now the music is kicking in, and this is the cue. 9M2. Vader shows up, and in the original, in John Williams' original writing, Vader is spelled Vadar. So he misspells Vader quite a bit in the early days, and it begins with this very ominous cello line where it goes, here, I'll put my, and then it's followed by, let's just hear it.
No problem. Why?
So you see, since we're a small operation, we don't fall into the jurisdiction of the Empire.
So you're part of the mining guild then?
No, not actually. Our operation is small enough.
What do you think of the way that this sounds, or the music?
It's crazy because like I've never really thought about it on like that granular of a level, but I think that just only shows how subconsciously John Williams can reinforce the emotion or theme that we're supposed to be feeling. So when you played it that second time, I was like, I've seen this movie hundreds of times. I don't think I've ever thought about that transition. It truly is mind blowing to think about how like he can peel, or he can have this subconscious layer that I haven't noticed my entire life. That's crazy to me.
So what is the subconscious layer to you?
It feels very brooding, and I know that's like not a very it's not a very like unique take on it. It just is what it is. Like he's just guiding me into this sense of like uneasiness. Like I just feel uneasy listening to it. So I'm shocked really to like continuously just peel back these layers and feel this way about something that I have just internalized my whole life.
So when that small brooding section is immediately followed by
So you
this,
see, since we're a small operation, we
Yeah.
don't fall into
what do you make of that?
the Empire.
So you're part of the mining guild then?
First of all, what do you think of that Cloud City theme? The Lando's Palace
I
theme?
like it. I think it kind of makes me feel like the way I feel about, what's another theme like it? I can't come up with an example, but it feels very political or very statesman-like, which to me inherently feels not 100% trustworthy. It gives the appearance of it being like very put together, but like the subtext of it is like this is all just kind of a facade type of thing. So I don't really feel like it has the same oomph as like a traditional hero theme would. I think how that manifests very musically is that maybe it's a little more simple of a theme versus like when I think about an Indiana Jones type of like heroes theme, it's got a lot more complex layers to it. And that's like a true reflection of like a hero's theme versus this is kind of just like John Williams scribbling on a piece of paper for 10 minutes in a restaurant. Like, oh, this is some throwaway theme I'm going to give to Lando because he's kind of a joke, or not really a joke, but he's kind of not exactly what he is trying to portray. So
Yeah.
that's kind of my thought about it.
Yeah, I actually have the same thought about it. And, other guests have mentioned kind of a similar thing of like, this theme feels a little bit like it's pretty. It evokes, I don't think it's John Williams like, I know that you don't actually think it, obviously he's not just scribbling something. I think there's a purpose. Right. I think there's like a reason that John Williams has this for these Lando scenes. And what you said, the statesman quality of it, it's sort of like, here's my presentation.
Yeah.
Like it's
kind of cheap. It's a little cheap.
It's like an imported association that we that people already have from this kind of music. Yeah. And I know because we played an orchestra together. Like you've played like Edward Elgar, like pomp and circumstance type of music.
Elgar, yeah.
Yeah. And this is like basically like pomp and circumstance type of music. It's kind of, and that kind of music, basically he's writing in this style that Edward Elgar and William Walton, really used for coronations, like for British royalty and coronation marches, Orb and Scepter, like stuff like that. Like pomp and circumstance is literally played at the proms. It's queen stuff, it's king stuff, it's that kind of thing. So putting it here is funny because it's not like Star Wars is lacking princesses. Leia is a princess. Like it's not lacking royalty. So having it for Lando is very much like, It's Lando making sure you see the diploma on his wall. It's Lando having the right regal,
for sure.
being like, this is the price of success. Yeah, and so it really does tip us off to like, okay, why does it sound like we're in like a kind of a fancy ceremony? Am I well dressed enough to be listening to the soundtrack right now? Like, I don't know. Yeah, so that, especially coming after that like ominous cello line, is like, okay, I don't like that we have to smile and
I know.
act like everything is fine right now. And we're about to find out exactly why.
Our operation is small enough not to be noticed.
Here he's bragging.
For everybody, since our customers are anxious to avoid attracting attention to themselves.
Aren't you afraid the Empire's going to find out about this little operation? Shut you down?
It's always been a danger, but it looms like a shadow over everything we've built here. But things have developed that'll ensure security.
Come on, Lando. What are you about to do, Lando?
Nice.
I've just made a deal that'll keep the Empire out of here forever.
Oh, I got a knot in my stomach here. Yeah, so that was a short-lived moment of pretending like everything was fine, because it's not fine. But he's bragging about it till the very end. Yeah, kind of sucks.
It sucks. As a kid, I felt betrayed. I really did. But now I'm kind of like, why should have Lando risked his entire city's kind of situation for a guy that he doesn't really like all that much based off what we see in the events of Solo? I don't know. It just to me, in retrospect, it's kind of like a little bit of entitlement on Han and Leia's part to think that like he would only be loyal to them and not this city that he is literally the governor of. I don't know. In revisionist history, I'm kind of looking at Lando being like, that might not have been the worst thing he could have done. Kid version of me is probably like, wow, that dude is dead to me because I love these characters. But I don't know. There's points to be made either both ways. Lando, I'm with you, man.
I have the same development in the way that I've thought about this pretty much exactly. Is as a kid, I didn't like Lando. But I will also say, as a kid, I didn't love Han Solo either. And
that's true. I kind of agree with that. Yeah, I agree with that.
Did you also not like Han Solo that much?
He was never in the running to be my favorite character because he just always felt like a little too cocky to me, and a little bit too erratic, I think as children I wanted to like feel a little more grounded in who my heroes were, and he was just kind of out there a little too much. So yeah. But anyway, and he didn't have a lightsaber either. He didn't have a lightsaber. So, like, not as cool. Like, toys with lightsabers, awesome. No lightsabers, it's okay. But continue.
That's so true. Sorry. If I were like playing with people as a kid, and like some people would get to have blasters, I bet some people would be like, "Oh, cool," but everyone wants a lightsaber. Come on, everyone wants a lightsaber. Yeah, the blaster has never in any universe it's never been the same universe of coolness as lightsabers. I agree with you where Lando was dead to me at this point as well. And I mean, we also just barely met him, and the only thing that we see is that he's just like hitting on Leia and bragging about his place. So at this point, we don't know much about him, to be fair. But yeah, didn't set us off on a good foot for him. However, now I'm like, especially now that I'm noticing for the first time, like how much I really feel that he regrets his decision. And even though he did this thing, he immediately afterward tries his best to minimize the damage. Like, oh yeah. And for sure. I see that a lot more now than I used to. Like, yeah. So, this is the moment where, obviously we have met. We hear the breathing.
Honored if you would join us.
And that's a memeable line right there. And I should mention Han shoots there. It is not a successful shot by any stretch. Vader is like, I mean, I think Anakin, who do you think is, this is a terrible question and there's no answer and it doesn't matter, but who do you think is more powerful? Anakin before he's Vader or Vader?
Oh my God.
Because I feel like in this film,
question.
Vader is top form in the context of Vader being how he is in the original trilogy.
I think it's hard because like I think those are two separate questions. Meaning, do you think Anakin is more powerful as a Jedi fighter, or do you think he's more powerful as a symbol type thing, or like a politician? Because I think Vader here is like if Darth Vader in Episode 5 had to physically fight Anakin Skywalker, I think Anakin Skywalker in Episode 3 would absolutely cream Darth Vader. But I think that what makes Vader Vader is that like it's his intimidation and the way he works like an entire galactic empire to be like the scariest, badass in the universe. I think to me that is scarier and more powerful than like being a physically better fighter.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna go with Vader Episode 5 as like the better Vader, but I think, as we see, and this is obviously due to just like the evolution of filmmaking, his mobility is not even close to like what Anakin would be in Episode 3. So
yeah.
Two different discussions, but I'm going with Episode 5 Vader. He's the most badass character. He scares me. He's scary. He's a scary guy.
Oh, he's very scary. I would, if I saw him, well, I do this sometimes when I'm like on walks and I see people I recognize like from the neighborhood or whatever. I'm like, we haven't really introduced. I don't really want to awkwardly say hi. I'll kind of just turn around, or I'll do that if I just want to avoid something. If I saw Vader in my peripheral vision, I would absolutely not try to approach, would not try to impress him in any way. I would just want him to never know who I am. So I think Vader is, I think the intimidation factor is definitely a strong point. I don't feel that he's actually very politically savvy, though. I feel like he, just like Anakin, Vader is not very politically savvy either. I think neither of them cared about politics that much. I mean, they're the same person, but I think it's all Palpatine is doing all that.
I disagree with that wholly, actually. Have you read Shadows of the Empire? It's the book that takes place in between Empire and Return of the Jedi, where it
I may have read it as a kid, but I don't.
So, and I'm not saying that this should be
obviously it's
canon,
not
but
canon.
This is one of the few books that like I actually read as a kid. I'd say there's maybe like 5 or 6 books I read and really understood as a kid, and this is one of them. And like one of the central plot points of that book is the political battle between Vader and the main antagonist of that, Prince Caesar. And that is a very political Darth Vader who actually ends up winning that exchange in a very like measured, calculated way. And you see like the kind of fear that, Darth Vader strikes even in like the head of all crime in the entire galactic universe. So I think to me that
what is the
also
political
colors
struggle in that book?
So in that struggle, you have Darth Vader, who obviously is Palpatine's right hand, and Prince Caesar is the head of a criminal organization who is also trying to become Palpatine's right-hand man. Mm-hmm. So it's like this little like cat and mouse battle between like how he can oust Vader, both physically and politically, to become like the number 2 in command of the entire universe, essentially. There's a lot of details that I don't remember exactly like how he executes that plan, but that's like a central theme of the book is Caesar trying to unseat Vader. And there's like multiple times in the book where he's trying to like manipulate certain people or manipulate Vader himself to like position him into that role. So overall, though, I think my larger point being is that having read that book so early in my Star Wars fandom, I think has always put that political context for me for Vader. So I don't think anyone would be wrong to say otherwise. That's just my personal experience with Star Wars. And I think when it comes down, this is my personal plug, if they're ever going to make a movie about Star Wars ever again, which I know they will, there really needs to be a Shadows of the Empire movie, because that is one of my favorite Star Wars stories out there. And I don't know if you've read it recently, but it is.
I haven't read it recently.
It's so good. Oh, I read it recently.
Okay, I will. I'm going to read it. I'll read it. I recently reread the Heir to the Empire trilogy. Yeah, I mean, obviously it's Legends. However, Legends doesn't mean didn't happen. It just means hasn't been confirmed, which I think is what people from Lucasfilm have stated. I mean, they draw from the well of Legends all the time. So I guess you're talking about political in a, maybe I don't mean political. I think I mean, okay, let me rephrase the question. I think Palpatine is clearly like some sort of a fascist, like imperial, like wants to just conquer everything and be all powerful and whatever. Yeah. So if we go back to all the politics from the prequels, and I'm thinking of all those conversations between Anakin and Padme, who like Padme clearly she believes in democracy. She's she has political ideals, I think is what I mean. I think Anakin doesn't have political ideals. I think he is still trying to figure it out. I think he could develop to have them, but he wants to do good, but like in their conversation in Attack of the Clones, when he's like, sort of like the Jedi, his understanding is the Jedi help people, we fix things, and it should be that way. Like we should be fixing things. And he kind of puts a lot of, that's how he's used to interacting with things. The political people that he trusts, the Republic, they tell the Jedi what to do. Like, okay, we do this, like, help this planet, help that. And so Anakin helps a lot of people during the Clone Wars and just, throughout that whole era. And I think when he is drawn to Palpatine, the senator, the chancellor, he's drawn to him from a person. It's personal. It's not like, I really like what that politician thinks. I want to join up with him. He joins Palpatine like purely for personal motives. If Palpatine had different political goals, it wouldn't have mattered. He wasn't in it for like what they were going to achieve together, ever. He was in it for how Palpatine could help him save the people he loves. It was personal.
I don't disagree with that, but I still think prequel Anakin is very political. He's not a politician. Like, he doesn't care about the Galactic Empire, but like one of the major plot points of the back half of the prequel trilogy is how he's trying to manipulate his way to be on the Jedi Council and be a master. Like, yes, he is trying to get close to Palpatine for personal reason, but like he literally flipped out when he found out that he was going to be on the Jedi Council but not granted the rank of master. Yeah. And I think that like you don't necessarily need to be a politician to be political in how you go about things. So I think that he's always been political in that sense, not in like the let's vote in the Senate chamber sense. And I think that's also manifested in the original trilogy by how he's trying to figure out how to rule the Empire with Luke. So I think that, to me, I've always felt that Anakin is political, not a politician. That's always been my understanding of him.
Yeah, no, and I'm saying I agree with you that he is political in that interpretation, but he doesn't have a clear like platform of things that he wants. He is political in, and he can figure out ways to get his aims met and to do things and get ranks and whatever. He can do that, but yeah, he's not like I think we should require.
He's not coming up with policy.
On this.
He's not. Yeah, he's not the Bernie Sanders of the Galactic Senate or whatever you want to equate him to. That's not his deal.
He doesn't have He doesn't have like specific ideas. Yeah. Anyway, so. And I think in the original trilogy, even though he is political with a lowercase p or whatever, he also is motivated by also just wanting to do something with his son. He's trying to figure that out. Like, yeah. I don't think he just switches to the light side on a complete dime. I think he is at this point already, since he knows about the presence of his son, I think has this seeds of like, I think he's having twitches already of like, my gosh.
I can feel that.
Yeah. Okay. So let's keep playing. Do you recognize that contrabassoon part?
No, play it again.
Okay, first, I mean, I'm. This is kind of not a trick question, but
I actually do. I think I know. At least to me, this is reminiscent of the scene when the Millennium Falcon is attached to the Star Destroyer, and then they kind of go off with the space junk. And then you have Slave One with Boba Fett coming in, and then you hear the bassoon part where he is. It's like.
yeah, it sounds like a car sputtering. Like,
Yeah. At least that's what it reminds me of.
yep, it's Boba Fett's theme.
Yeah.
And I didn't even know it was a theme until recently-ish, in the past couple years.
I don't know if you listened to that soundtrack as much as I did, because that is
I definitely
actually
didn't, because I don't even have a memory of I don't have memory of having any soundtrack except for Phantom Menace.
I used to wake up to that specific track on the Episode 5 soundtrack in high school. Like, I set my alarm to wake up to that track. Yep. Yeah.
Interesting. Well, you always listened to soundtracks more than I did in general, so I guess this makes sense. It makes sense that we had the soundtracks. I have been saying on the record on the show, listeners will be like, Xanthi was lying this whole time about not having the soundtracks. No, I guess I just personally didn't listen to any of them regularly.
I think it's because we only
Phantom
bought
Menace.
one version of it, and I always was the one that got it.
Yeah,
I would be the one that stole it.
I think that's also a big factor. Yeah. I mean, I listened to probably a lot more like classical music that was not soundtrack music growing up.
Sure.
So yeah, Boba Fett's theme, and also a character that I didn't even really notice that much in the movie ever.
That's a crime. It's a crime against humanity.
There have been three crimes.
He's always looked cool.
So that's the reason that you like him, is that he looks cool.
Yes, 100%. 100%. He just looks so, like, oh my gosh, he looks so cool. Look at him.
Did you have the toy before you saw? How soon did you get the toy? Did you? Yeah.
I don't remember. I don't remember what the timeline was, but I had many Boba Fett toys. Many. And he always had the coolest stuff that came with him. Always. Boba Fett was the coolest Star Wars toy that was not a vehicle. Period. So many versions of him. And I really wish we were in the 5-minute scene where they have all the bounty hunters lined up on the deck of Executor, because that to me is quite possibly one of the single greatest shots in cinematic history. Just like it's freaking Boba Fett, IG-88, Dengar, Forlums, like it's just like the who's who of like, these are the coolest looking characters. Let's just put them all standing next to each other. That is just so cool. And I'm sorry. I don't care. I mean, The Mandalorian's good. It just is not the same, because Boba Fett, there's just like this mystery around him that also makes him so cool. Like, he looks cool. When he talks, he sounds cool. He has the coolest ship. Everything about him is cool. This is like the coolest part about Star Wars, is how cool Boba Fett looks and how cool the vehicles are. I just love it so much. I'm sorry. It's too good. It's too good.
While I didn't specifically hone in on Boba Fett ever, and it's been a crime against humanity that I've committed, certainly. I do agree that like the setting, just the non-main characters, just the things we get to see that are the coolest, are like the coolest part of Star Wars. Just the incidental details, like going through the cantina, or just like
so
getting
good
to see all that stuff. It really makes Star Wars for sure. Now, regarding what Boba Fett sounds like, okay, I'm going to keep playing, so you're going to hear what Boba Fett sounds like in this scene, and we'll talk about that.
Choice, they arrived right before you did. I'm sorry.
I'm sorry too.
Oh, do we not hear Boba Fett in these minutes?
No, we should.
Yeah, we do. But I also just want to highlight how mournful the strings sound there. Like after Lando says, I had no choice, like, I'm sorry. the music does convey that.
We would be honored if you would join us.
So Boba Fett's theme.
I had no choice. They arrived right before you did. I'm sorry.
I'm sorry, too.
They're so bitter, the strings. Anguished moans from Chewie. Another harp transition. Just bloop, gets us there.
No 3POs with them.
I just love how quickly the harp is like a palate cleanser. And now we're with Luke in his cockpit. And he's still on the way. But it's like, meanwhile, we're doing this. And we hear his theme. And it's, in kind of the nice, dainty little flute version, flute, oboe version, whatever it is, woodwinds. Luke's in like a good place right now. I mean, he's, okay, all things considering, he hasn't arrived at the like shitstorm yet. He's on his way to help his friends, kind of feeling confident. His theme's playing. Yeah. He's like, just hang on.
I don't know. I think. Oh, sorry.
No, go ahead.
Were you gonna play a clip? I feel like the fact that it's just like the woodwind section to me like makes it feel very weak and kind of reinforces how like weak Luke is in a sense. I don't know. Like to me, I don't think that when I hear that I'm like, oh, he's in a good place. A part of me listens to that and is like, man, Luke's about to get lit the F up right now. And I know a lot of that. I know a lot of that is me knowing what's gonna happen, but like in general, like when Luke is like saving someone or when anyone's saving someone, it's like much more like, let's bring in all the instruments. Let's have like the full weight of, like a call to action here. I feel like this is just kind of like, here's a little support for you, but you're about to have a bad time and lose a hand. So enjoy it while it lasts.
Well, clarification. When I say yes to what you said, but he's not in a good place narratively. Like he's about to get creamed, but it's. I guess what I mean is like he believes he is in a good place. This is before he realizes how bad it is. This is reminiscent of when we hear his theme on Tatooine for the first time in A New Hope, where the first times we hear that theme, it's just like this really cute, like homespun. It's Luke with the woodwind. So he's kind of connecting to his boyhood Luke. Like, I'm off to save my friends. Look, I just went through a bunch of Jedi training. I'm so much more equipped. R2, we're fine. Yeah.
Yeah. His ass is about to get worked. Absolutely worked.
Yeah. So enjoy this theme while it lasts.
Come on, we're almost there.
Again, the harp is ushering us back to Cloud City. We have an absolutely horrible alarm. And Chewie is not okay. Chewie is not in a good place.
No. Poor Chewie. I feel like we don't spend enough time talking about Chewie in this movie. He's like so neglected.
He is.
Oh, poor guy.
And he is 3PO's only true friend here. I mean, because R2's not here.
Yeah.
Because of Chewie, if it weren't for Chewie, they could have accidentally just left our 3PO there. Easily. They would have.
Yeah.
A little nod to the sound design is like, we can hear that horrible alarm that sounds like kind of an ascending chromatic line. It's like over and over again. There's I'm hearing a slight Doppler effect as Chewie moves, which I think means that he's getting closer to the alarm, but it's very slight.
Oh, yeah.
It's extremely slight.
Damn,
but
that's crazy.
Yeah. It's really good detail in that.
They thought of everything. They really thought of everything. Jeez Louise.
Yeah. And then Chewie picks up some of 3PO's pieces. And let's see if I have a screenshot of that. But it's... Here we go.
Nice.
It's the money shot. He's like, ah.
Love it. Oh, that's a good one. Man, poor 3PO.
Yeah. I mean,
He's
honestly,
going to be all right, though.
3PO's going to be all right. I
all
feel worse for Chewie right now. Well, 3PO's unconscious, but Chewie is like, this is our friend. Like, Chewie's
Or
the
like,
one
this
that
is
has
like
to deal with
the
this.
hardest Lego set ever. Are you kidding? It looks complicated AF to put together. Are you kidding?
I don't remember Legos having wires in them. Oh no.
That's fair, yeah.
Yeah. This. Yeah. Chewie saves this droid. And the degree to which they give him vocalizations, like his grunts, his moans,
Yeah.
his like, they give it so much airtime or ear time or whatever. Yeah, I think it heightens my feelings, at least, of, it makes me really feel for Chewie, and I don't know, his anguish really comes through.
Yeah.
And the music that comes in a bit, it's like, I don't know.
He's so expressive.
He's so expressive. And no music, which kind of makes it feel more lonely.
so
It's
good.
like Chewie is like alone.
So good.
Chewie doesn't even have no orchestra for Chewie here,
Yeah.
which, makes sense. The cavernous, we hear the echo as well of like, oh. Now we have just a sad oboe line.
Ugh, Chewie. You're doing the work, man. You're doing the work.
And that's the end of the minutes, and that's the beginning of the cue 9M3 putting 3PO together. Yeah.
What a G. Love that guy.
Yeah.
Chewie's such an underrated character.
Do you
I really,
feel that?
do I feel that what?
Do you feel that Solo, a Star Wars story, did him justice?
I don't think Star Wars Solo Story did anyone justice. I don't really. I mean, it was fine. Like, it was a fine movie. It was acceptable. It was an acceptable way to spend 2 hours of my life. But I in general just don't feel like I learned anything that useful about any of the characters. I don't know. I'm not saying I didn't learn anything about him, but like, I was expecting some sort of like, mind-blowing thing that I would learn about Han or Chewie. And you know what? I didn't. And that's okay. I'm okay. I've come to grips with what Star Wars is now, and that's okay. I'm just going to leave it at that. I'm okay with that.
Yeah, fair enough. I agree with you. I appreciated, so I think the score of it was better than I had remembered. I think John Powell did a good job. But it was kind of silly. I mean, it was kind of silly the revelations that we had about the characters, like Han Solo getting his name and whatever, Chewbacca getting his nickname. Yeah.
It just doesn't really do it for me anymore. I don't know. Do you think that? Okay, I guess it's a separate conversation, but I'm just curious. How would you rank the soundtracks of non-John Williams Star Wars stuff? Like, what's the? Just give me the top 3 for you.
Andor, Tales of the Jedi, and then probably, I don't know, I don't think the Mandalorian score is very good, but the theme song is catchy, and so the Mandalorian theme song, I guess.
I would have thought you would have said Rogue One. I remember you talking about it a while ago, but maybe that was.
I forgot about that. Okay, wait, redo that. Solo: A Star Wars Story, I think, would be number 1, and then movies are in a different tier than shows, though. So we only have 2 movies to pick from. So I would say Solo, and then I don't know. I think I liked Solo better than Rogue One, the score. But then the music of Andor was just so different, but also effective. And I think that was really cool because, I don't know, we've gotten sort of things that are sort of like John Williams style knockoffs that don't really get there. And for me, that's kind of worse than just trying something new. Yeah. But then Tales of the Jedi was pretty nice.
Who did I haven't seen Andor yet, but who did the music for it?
Nicholas Britell.
Oh, okay. Got it. Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's very different, and it's I think it's refreshing. I will also say that it's hard for me to rank soundtracks in general, and my feelings about soundtracks are extremely tied to how I feel about the movie or show as well. It's very rare that I hated a movie but loved the soundtrack, or just like, or vice versa.
Okay.
Usually if I liked the soundtrack a lot, then I think that the movie was awesome. So like Moonrise Kingdom, like anything that Johnny Greenwood does, like it's good scores go with good movies. So I think like what you said about like who will be the next sort of composer who can do big symphonic scores like that. In my head, I'm thinking like who will be the director and producer who can facilitate big scores like that, because one big part of the score for Star Wars being so successful is George Lucas's role in it as well.
Yeah, for sure.
In having the concept, in being like not like more of this, less of that, in like his aesthetic. I guess his aesthetic sensibility was so clear that it gave the score a really good direction. And film scoring is not just on the composer for what goes well and what doesn't go well. It's on the whole production, because it's like filmmaking is teamwork, and the composer is not in charge. The composer is hired. The composer is going to do what the director wants them to do.
Right. Unless you're John Williams and you're making E.T.
Right. Yeah. Spielberg did cut the end of that movie to match what John Williams wrote. But, that also takes having a special relationship and trust between two partners. And with a lot of modern movies, it's not like the director and composer don't always have like a very special relationship. It's sort of just like work for hire, do the thing oftentimes. And there's so many people involved. So that's what I think. Yeah. I'll be curious what you think of Andor when you get to it.
I know, me too. I'm really excited for it because you know how I feel about Rogue One. So I'm looking forward to it. I really am.
Rogue One is, I didn't love Rogue One, but I loved Andor. So I know you loved Rogue One, so you might be even set up even more for it. I thought I was not excited for Andor, other than just having a new Star Wars show. I was like, okay, a story I didn't ask for, I guess.
Do you feel like you have the same level of excitement every time something new from Star Wars is released?
No. In fact, although I'm starting to realize in advance the types of things that I am more excited about. Like, I couldn't be more excited. Andor Season 2 can't come soon enough. Like, I can't believe we have to wait till 2024 for it, or 2025 or 20. I don't know. I don't remember. Because that show is really good. Mandalorian Season 3, I'm like, because of the way that the Book of Boba Fett went, I wasn't excited for Mandalorian Season 3. I would have been excited for it if we didn't have those characters pop up in Book of Boba Fett and resolve the tension that the season finale of Episode 2 left us with. It kind of spoiled the beginning of Mandalorian for me. When the new animated shows come out, I'm not particularly interested unless they're offshoots. Like, I will be excited to see Star Wars Visions when that comes out, because those are actually it's a pretty interesting project. But yeah, in general, I've lost kind of a lot of trust with the media that Star Wars is putting out. And at this moment, there are 2 shows coming out at the same time, which for me is too much.
It's way too much.
It's too much. And they both drop at midnight on the same day. I'm like, it feels ridiculous that the Bad Batch and The Mandalorian are coming out at the same time.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm sure that's a different conversation for a different day, but it's just too overwhelming. And that's the problem too, is that they haven't done anything to make me feel like they've earned an automatic watch for it now. You know, like there's been more bad than good, I would say, since the since the Disney acquisition. So I feel like I really need to like get excited for something, but I don't know. I'm trying to just like be a little more organic with how I come to the Star Wars projects now. So
Yeah, that's probably good because it kind of sucks to be in a place when, like, I don't like being in this place where I'm sort of guarded, like, kind of expecting the worst. I used to expect the best. And
yeah.
unlike you, I actually liked the sequel trilogy and I loved The Last Jedi. And, like, I know that you liked The Last Jedi at least more than The Rise of Skywalker, but I actually liked them both, which I think is actually it's kind of usually
That makes no
people
sense
liked
to me.
one or the other. But I think at that point, my trust in the franchise was so high that I was willing to take that extra leap of faith. And yeah, now I'm just a little bit, tempered excitement. At this point, I mine Star Wars for its parts that I find interesting. I will say that some of the books sometimes satiate my need for good Star Wars stories more than screen stuff. Like, I think the most Star Wars awesome thing to come out in the past several years has been the two Thrawn trilogies. Those feel like the thrill of like new Star Wars again for me.
It's interesting.
Yeah. Anyway, Star Wars. But not rediscovering, but I guess reminding myself of like the reasons that I originally got into Star Wars is always going to keep me grounded in that place. And I am fortunate. I do feel glad to have grown up before the sequel trilogy and before the Disney acquisition. Well, that I feel like growing up in the prequel era was like the best era to grow up in.
I agree. That is the perfect golden age of Star Wars fandom, without a
I think
doubt.
so,
Because I honestly like, a part of me is sad that this is the fourth time we're mentioning Alan. A part of me is sad that Alan didn't grow up in that age, because I know how he feels about the prequel trilogy, and that makes me a little sad. Just because he's such a sentinel part of my enjoyment of Star Wars, and I wish that I wish that was something that we could also share,
Yeah.
because I think
He was just
if
like a
nothing
little
else-
too old to think.
Yeah. Either way, though. But I guess my question for you is: are you going to do these podcasts for the sequel trilogy? Are you going to sit through?
Yeah, I've already done The Last Jedi.
You're going to do this for Rise of Skywalker.
Yep, that's the next season. Mm-hmm.
You're going to watch Rise of Skywalker and spend months of your life on that movie.
Yes, and the thing is, personally, I liked the movie for one thing. I know not all the guests that I have on will have liked the movie, and not all listeners will have liked the movie. But the framing of this show is to at least give every minute of the John Williams scores airtime. Like every minute, and this
fair.
is John Williams' and here's the thing, John Williams never phones it in for Star Wars. There are parts of the Rise of Skywalker soundtrack that will be forgotten by people just because they don't like the movie, and that are part of what John Williams is expressing with putting the cap on his 9-movie like portfolio for Star Wars. And so, if anything, like, I hope at least listeners are willing to, hear what John Williams basically, I don't know. I feel like anytime we're talking about something John Williams wrote, it's just like, I just want to savor that, because I think he, I don't know, he puts so much in his music that embedded in it is his own interpretation of Star Wars in a way. So
that's fair. I think out of respect for John Williams, that's a good approach to have towards it. But I mean, I can personally speak for myself only that I actually have still never seen Rise of Skywalker all the way through, because I fell asleep both times when I had to
in the
watch
theater.
it. So once was theater, and then I revisited it last year and I fell asleep again. That to me was the absolute trough of Star Wars. But that's another conversation for another time.
Yeah.
I respect you for sitting through. That's the longest Star Wars movie, isn't it? Or the second longest? It's a long one,
It's
right?
pretty long. Last Jedi might
Yeah.
be longer. I'm not sure though.
Yeah.
None of them are like egregiously longer than the others, though. There's none that are like over 3 hours or anything.
Fair enough. Well, that'll be interesting.
Yeah. Well, for me, it's not, doesn't feel that agonizing to sit through that movie since I like it. However, I will also say that there is also a big plus in that movie being so recent, in that lots of musicians that played on it are still alive. I mean, most of them are. And I have colleagues that played in it and sang in it, so I'll be able to talk to people about what it was like to work with John Williams.
That's going to be cool. Wow, that's actually really cool.
I already have people who have promised to come on.
That's sick. That's awesome.
Yeah. So.
Cool.
Yeah, so that'll be happening. All right, so before I ask you the Star Wars Music Minute questionnaire, I'm just going to run through the stats from this set of minutes. All right, so the cues that we have gotten to are the end of 8M3, Lando's Palace, and then we heard 9M2, Vader shows up, and then we heard the very beginning of 9M3, putting 3PO together. The musical themes have been the Force theme, the main theme, A section, Han and Leia, A section, the Cloud City, Lando's Palace theme, and the Imperial March. And then in the soundtrack, if you're following along, you can find this music on Betrayal at Bespin. And okay. I'm going to ask you the Star Wars Music Minute questionnaire now, Nick, which is just a fun little questionnaire, whatever. It doesn't have to be too serious. Some people get very stressed out about the first question, though. So question number 1 is, in exactly 3 words, what does Star Wars sound like?
Oh my gosh. Distress. I was pulling my email because I remember you sending me the email and I was like, oh crap, I needed to think of this. And I hadn't thought of it before.
You won't be the first person to just come up with it off the top of your head.
So can you repeat the question one more time?
Yeah. In exactly 3 words, what does Star Wars sound like?
I think, okay. I'm debating if I'm going to say 3 separate words or like put 3 words together to make a phrase. And
you can give 2 separate answers.
I don't know. I can't think of 3 to put together. So I'm just going to do 3 individual. So I think it sounds both classic and modern at the same time. So one would be classic, one would be modern, and then the last one would be nostalgic for me.
Yeah.
Classic, modern, nostalgic.
Yeah. What do you mean by modern?
I think what it does really well is, I know that it was made in like the 70s and 80s, but like the actual like Star Wars universe, I think we can all agree, even though it says long, long time in a galaxy far, far away, it's more modern than our current society. So I think what the music does a good job of is making music that fits a time that has like far advanced technology. So I think that like there are certain phrases, not necessarily in the clips we just heard, but especially in the prequel trilogy, that almost sound like it's diegetic, where it's like in the actual scene. So I think that for me, it reflects a more advanced technological space than other classical music would. But like that's why I said the first word too. It feels like, in general, like Star Wars has very romantic, and not like necessarily like in a love sense, but just like romanticizing about like the adventure or the thrill. And I think that is a very classic feel as well. So I kind of think it's perfectly positioned to make you feel those emotions, but then also reflect the society that it's existing in. And then nostalgic, just because like that's what Star Wars is for everyone at this point, really.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, that's a perfect answer. Okay, question number 2 is, what is something related in some way to the music or sound of Star Wars that you're curious about and want to learn more about?
I mean, I don't really have a ton of retention in my music theory knowledge about chord progressions and like resolutions of phrases. And I think that I've always been interested in how they take central themes and put variations on them to transition them into a specific emotion. So I think that I would like to understand more, like, how does that work on a structural musical level? Like, what about this phrase changed to sound this way to make it feel this emotion? And then what I would like to kind of build off on that is is to see like an example of that used in a different movie, either with John Williams or with a different composer. You know, I think to me those are interesting things.
That would be a good that would be a good like if a video essay person. That would be a good thing for me to do, probably, honestly, at some point,
Yeah,
to make a
that'd be
video
cool.
on that. Okay, final question is, what is a score or soundtrack that you're fond of besides anything Star Wars?
Does it have to be? I'll give you two. I'll give you two
Okay.
because one's John Williams, one's not. I actually think that a case could be made. It would not. I would not agree with this case. I'm Star Wars all the way, but I think that you can make a case that E.T. might be the better John Williams score.
I knew you were going to say E.T.
I think you could. I think you could make the case. I wouldn't agree with it, but I think you could make the case. But I think just to diversify from John Williams, I think that I would put the Butch Cassidy and Sundance Kid soundtrack up there. I'm sure there's a lot of different ways people have taken this answer. I'm doubtful someone has mentioned that score before because I think it is not as like adjacent to Star Wars, but I still, as you know, feel very connected to that movie, and the soundtrack, and for completely different ways, I think really helps kind of glue my emotions together with that whole thing. So I would say Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid.
Composed by...
I think it's Burt Bacharach is the person that...
Oh, really?
I know
he just died, didn't he?
Let me see. Let me look this up real quick. I honestly... I'm not as good as you are when it comes to this kind of stuff, but it's Burt Bacharach.
Okay. Yeah.
It's really good.
No, I agree. Now I'm remembering it. Yeah. No, he just passed away a month ago.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I
forgot that he did that.
Yeah, I think the reason why is obviously composers can tell me if they feel differently, but I think to me the hardest emotion to feel in a movie from a score is melancholy, and I think that the Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid soundtrack like does it so well, and I feel it like so deeply and like truthfully, and I don't know. It's also got a unique orchestration to it. The movie itself is really good. So, like you were mentioning, you kind of got to have good source material from the film as well. So, that's what I would go with, aside from E.T.
Yeah. I mean, E.T. was definitely one that I thought you were going to say. But the second one I wasn't expecting. Lots of people have said E.T., but you're the first person to say Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid. So,
fair enough.
Yeah, I haven't watched that in a really, really long time. But I remember I liked that movie too.
Oh, so good.
Yeah.
So good.
I mean, I think I got most of my film. Like, anytime films come up and I'm able to be like, act like I'm smart and say like, oh yeah, I know that film. A lot of it stems back to just like that one year, that one summer of our lives where we watched so many films because you had taken a film class. And so you knew like all the films that were like, American cinema. And before that point, like I didn't know many of those films. That was like my crash course in like cinema history. Like, oh my gosh, Rear Window, which like, oh my gosh.
We watched all those on a laptop too. We watched almost
true.
every single one of those movies on a laptop.
Yeah, we did.
Which is the craziest part to me. But yeah,
I know.
the sound
probably sounded horrible and everything, but like China, like, yeah, I remember we watched Shawshank Redemption. I thought it was going to be like a slasher movie because of the shanking in the title. Yeah. My mind was like blown that summer with like all these movies.
So good. Oh man. Well, there's a lot of good movies that came out this year. The Oscar race has a lot of good ones up there, but I would say from a score standpoint, I don't think anything that you would necessarily be jumping out of your seat for. Maybe, I don't know. Really? I'll text you later.
Okay, I have to finish seeing them, but yeah.
What have you watched so far?
I've watched Everything Everywhere All at Once and Tar, and that's it.
Okay. All right. Yeah, that's fair.
I still need to see The Banshees. I still need to see The Fabelmans. I feel bad that I haven't seen that yet, but
okay.
Yeah, I will.
All right.
I will though.
Sounds
so I can
good.
weigh in on the scores. Anyway, I know you're not like super online, but is there any place online that you want to mention, plug, or anything?
No. I don't really.
Yeah.
I'm not really. I'm not really into that.
Yeah.
I don't really know what else to say. There's nothing to plug.
Yeah.
There's nothing.
Yeah. Nick's just a doctor. Yeah. His life's not like online. Yeah. Well, I'm really happy that you came on the show. Thank you, Nick.
Yeah, it was fun. Thanks.
Yeah. I reference you on the show so much. I mean, just when I'm talking about like childhood, I'll be like, my brother and I would see this and whatever. So, yeah. Now we've gotten to clear the record on a few things, and now I have to eat some of my words with regard to never owning the Empire Strikes Back soundtrack. Yeah.
Fair enough.
Yeah. All right. Well, listeners, thanks for listening to this episode of Star Wars Music Minute. I will be back next week to talk about minutes 91 through 95 of this film. And with that, may the Force be with you, and talk to you next week on Star Wars Music Minute.